Let's move along here and let's observe the polynomial 4x plus 2. You'll notice with this one right here, there are two terms in our polynomial. Okay, so we can say that there are two terms in this polynomial. We have 4x and 2. Those are two separate terms. Both of those terms are positive. We'll get into some negatives in just a little bit, but both those terms are positive. Now, 4x has a coefficient of 4, a variable of x, and a degree of, a little bit of a pause for dramatic effect, it has a degree of 1. Okay, it's got a degree of 1. There is no little exponent there, so we assume, or we base that, it's not an assumption, we're basing it on that. We don't need to write the 1, so it is 1. Okay, so it has a degree of 1 as the exponent is not shown. Now, on the 2, on the other hand, has no variable, and because there is no variable, the value of this term will never change. Okay, it is called a constant, which we went through earlier, and if there is a term that has no variable, it is called the constant. Okay, so it's a constant, and we're going to call this the constant. We don't deal with coefficient, we don't deal with variables, exponents. It's just a constant, and we're going to leave it exactly as a constant. Now, just as a quick little heads up, if we do have a constant, there is no variable, and the only way there will not be a variable is if it has a degree of 0. Okay, if it has a degree of 0, then it will be a constant. So if you do not see a variable, it has a degree of 0. We'll get into that in a little bit, a few lessons later on. We're not going to worry too much about what degree of 0 means right now, but if we have a constant, it's a degree of 0, and just leave it exactly as that, degree of 0. Now, as we mentioned before, the largest degree in this polynomial is 1. Okay, right? 1 and 0, 1 being the biggest, which comes from the 4x term. Therefore, the degree of this polynomial is 1. Okay, so the degree of the polynomial is 1 because that's the biggest degree in the polynomial. And that's something that we can just take a look at and be aware of. Now, we could potentially have more than one coefficient and more than one variable, and we'll get into some examples of that in a little bit later on. But for right now, these ones so far still just have one coefficient and one variable. So let's look at this question here. Let's determine the coefficient or coefficients, variable or variables, degree and constant of the polynomial 6x cubed minus 5. So the coefficient right here, we only have one term that has a variable, so we will only have one coefficient, and that will be 6. And that comes from the 6x cubed. We're not going to deal with this negative 5 here right now because there's no variable, so it can't be a coefficient. There's just a number, it's a constant. The variable that we are using in here, okay, you'll notice there's only one letter, and that letter is x, so that will be the only variable that is in this polynomial. And the degree of this polynomial is the biggest one, which is 3. It's actually, well, there's 3 and 0, so 3 is the biggest. So this polynomial will have a degree of 3. Finally, the constant is this piece right here, okay, which is negative 5. So it has a constant of negative 5. And it's important to remember there that a negative sign in front of the number means that the number is negative. We are adding a negative number on, which is the same as subtracting that number. Okay, so adding a negative is like subtracting that number, and so subtracting the positive, right? So it's like subtracting 5, and so minus 5 or negative 5 are the exact same thing, and so that's why we take this term to be a negative term, and therefore the constant is negative. All right, so again, remember that if there are more than one term that has a variable, we will have more than one coefficient. if there is more than one letter or type of letter, not letter, there could be a whole bunch of x's, and then our variable will just be x. If we have x and something else, then we will have another one, and the degree will be the biggest exponent that's given in the polynomial. Question 3, please work through that question. You're going to be doing exactly this. Make sure that you write out your answers and show your work.